Well, the gang's all here. Welcome, everybody. Sasquatch Experience. That's me, Sean the Fort Chop Forker, here with Henry May, Vance Nesbitt, James Baker, and our guest tonight, Mr. Todd Neiss, formerly Sergeant Neiss, but we're here to have him on the show. It's going to be a good show tonight, guys. Todd, welcome back. It's only been a year since we've had you on the program.
Thanks for having me back. It's nice to be back.
It seems like a week, though, Todd. Come on. Seriously, when Sean mentioned the fact that, he hasn't been on for a year, I'm like, no, that was a week ago. So, yeah, I appreciate you coming back to do a follow-up with us tonight. This is fantastic.
We have James Baker back from assignment where he was last week. Still look a little peaked, but I'm sure he'll make it through. And Henry May, as always, you guys figured out last week the great mystery. Yes, he wears pants during the show. And
we still can't tell with the camera angle.
You can't. And I think that's true. That's a mystery. As legendary as Bigfoot.
That mystery. No one wants to know.
No one wants to know.
Look, I'm going to do a shout out right here. Yes. Welcome to the Midwest. There it is. My favorite t-shirt.
Welcome to the Midwest. Well, we got a great show tonight. The last time we were on the show, we only got as far as to talk about your sighting, Todd. So if we could do the cliff notes to the listeners who did their homework and caught up today, I want to go a little forward past that because you have a hell of a lot of body of work post your sighting that I think sometimes we get caught up in, right?
28 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. So, Todd, fill us in quick. You were actually on patrol, or you were in the middle of a mission when you had your sighting, right?
That's correct. We were actually doing demolitions training in the Oregon Coast Range with the combat engineer unit I was with back then.
That's pretty dangerous work in itself.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, actually.
That's what they all say.
Well, it ruins the 4th of July, though.
No doubt. A lot of explosives going on. And that's when you had the visual sighting of something off in the distance, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, but just for those of your listeners that aren't aware of what actually got me started in research was we had been doing this demolition training at 3 different sites, and we had already detonated the first 2 sites and had moved on to the 3rd one. And we had set a cratering charge, about, 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we'd been soaking in diesel fuel. And we set the fuses and got in our convoy to get the heck out of there. And we had 4 vehicles, 2 Humvees up front, a troop transport in the middle, and the commander's Humvee in the back. I happened to be a passenger in the 2nd Humvee sitting behind the driver. And it was really a beautiful day for April in Oregon, in the Coast Range. So I had the window open, and I was just kind of glancing around the countryside looking for deer and elk because that's what I hunted in that area. And looking for wildlife, and I got a little more than I counted on. As we had rounded a corner on our way to the staging area, I looked off to the left, and the 2nd blasting site we had detonated probably about an hour earlier came into view, and I see these 3 dark figures standing right out in the open of this kind of a concrete gray basalt gravel quarry. And being jet black, the contrast was unmistakable. And the first thought that came to my mind is, what are these people doing here? They were technically not supposed to be any civilians in the area, and we had everybody else accounted for. And so my concern was, these people could, technically be in range of some shrapnel from this upcoming explosion. But I hardly got the thought out of my mouth, or out of my head, actually, that what are these people doing? And I looked, and the more I looked, the more I realized that I wasn't looking at people at all. To begin with, the silhouettes were completely wrong to be human. They were very large. They looked really like bodybuilders, very broad shoulders. What really stuck out to me was the arms. The length of the arms extended well below their knees, and I don't believe they were leaning forward at all. But the size obviously jumped out at me as well. The three of them were standing abreast of each other, watching our convoy across the ravine, and the one in the middle stood a full head taller than the other two, and I would estimate its height near 9 feet. The other two were up to its shoulders, and even still were well over 7 feet tall. And as the larger one in the middle stood there like a statue, the two on either side of it were demonstrating this rocking side to side kind of thing, shifting weight from one foot to the other, and in the process, these long pendulous arms were swinging back and forth below their knees. And they exhibited that behavior the entire time I looked at them. And this wasn't a couple seconds something ran across the road in front of my car kind of sighting. I watched them for nearly half a minute. So I got a very, very clear view of them. And I couldn't even speak. I was just so focused on what I was looking at. And about 25 seconds had passed when we took a turn to the right, and I lost sight of them. And I just slumped down in my seat and really tried to comprehend what I just witnessed. I was not a believer prior to this. Of course, growing up in the Pacific Northwest, you can't help but hear the legend of Bigfoot, but little did I imagine that they were in fact real. And so we finally get down to the staging area, and I got out and ran back up the road we had just come down from, trying to get another view of them. And I soon realized that in order to get to a vantage point that I might be able to see them, I would be out of sight of the group, which was a big no-no. And so I just stood there on my tiptoes with my hand up to my forehead, trying to look off in the distance. And to my right, I hear somebody yell my voice. Sergeant Martin said, "Hey, Neiss." And I looked over at him, and I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "What are you looking at?" And I dropped my hand to my side, and I said, "Well, nothing." And he continued up my direction, and he was smoking on a cigarette, and he got right up to me and said, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site?" And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go." So I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" I wasn't going to be the one to say it. So he took a drag off a cigarette and looked left and right, make sure nobody else was in earshot. And he said, "Well, I saw 3 huge hair-covered a Bigfoot, I guess." And of course, at that, I acknowledged that I had seen the very same thing. He saw the exact same number, same description, and it was nice to know that somebody else had seen what I had seen. I had assumed I was alone in what I'd seen, and it's not that I needed the corroboration, but at the same time, it was nice to know that somebody had seen that. And I mean, I could never unsee what I saw that day. And being at that time in the traditional guards, National Guardsmen, we drill 1 weekend a month. So the very next drill would be in May, and lo and behold, we had 2 more soldiers come forward, independent of each other, and they each admitted to have seen the same thing. So in that sense, it's a very unique sighting. As you know, multiple animal sightings are fairly rare.
Yeah.
Multiple eyewitnesses are pretty rare. And then, of course, the nature of what we were doing, basically blowing up the forest, is kind of sets this one a little bit apart from others.
Right.
So anyway, that was my big epiphany in life, and I can't tell you how much it just amazes me to this day how 25 seconds of my entire adult life at that time has changed everything since. Really everything I've done has been, it's like Kevin Bacon. It always comes back to Bigfoot, you know.
Right.
But I've had a wonderful 28 plus years of research now, and have met some amazing people like yourselves, and I've just dedicated myself to continuing the chase, and hopefully, with any luck, we'll get some solid evidence. But that's the story.
You know, Todd, the first time you were on the show, there's a Google Earth image of where you had your encounter at. So then I paced out that location in an open farm field. And I was up on a rise on the road, and I paced it out and gave that location, or at least the distance from what you witnessed. From where you were at to what you saw, you can identify even a bunny rabbit at that distance. So you had a very good visual. You know, it sounds like it's, you know, this grandiose distance between what you were at and where you had the encounter at, but that's not really the case when you have a paced out visual and you take a look at it from that perspective. You could actually see small creatures at that distance, and to see something that's 9 feet tall, I find that totally credible, the fact that you're able to identify to say that this thing is probably about 9 feet tall, at least one of them, one of the three. So, you know, I appreciated that, the fact that you did that in the first show. And then I was able to say, not that I'm a doubter, but I wanted to be able to actually pace it out and take a look for myself. And that's one thing I wanted to contribute in tonight's show, is that, yeah, wow, you can be even a quarter mile away and still be able to identify things. When you have a clear visual reference, you're still able to see quite a bit, even at that distance. So,
well, if you're in Google Earth, and I've done this, as you know, there's probably there's a measuring tool, and I did measurements from the road that we were on down to the spot in the quarry where they were at. Came out to be about 735 feet.
Yeah, that's not far at all.
Well, and you consider in the military, we commonly, I should say routinely, shoot our M16s or M4s these days at on a 300 meter range, open sights, no optics, and this is using, on a MARF range, they have these half-human silhouettes that pop up, and I can tag those things all day long.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a bit of a distance, but again, with the contrast that was there, the fact that they had no clothing on whatsoever, and that's one thing Jeff pointed out. He said he was up at that vantage point earlier on when we were planning charges down at that second site. He said you could clearly make out uniforms and rifles and whatnot, and he concurred these things had any clothing whatsoever. But yeah, it was life-changing for me.
Sure it was. I would imagine it would be.
So Todd, was that the beginnings, like the genesis of your research? And if so, 28 years ago, the landscape to get into this and research was a hell of a lot different than it is now. How did you start it? Like, where was your starting point?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, that was actually the defining moment for my research. But I recall coming back from drill back to Portland, and the very next day I hit a library, and I can't really remember the last time I ever was in a library except in school. But I went in and checked out as many books as they would let me on the subject. I wanted to go, learn as much as I could about them, and I just decided it would be my quest in life to learn as much as I could and to see what I can do. I mean, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. I mean, once you've seen them, certainly a blessing, but the curse is that you just really have this insatiable need almost to see them again. It's kind of like you see something that isn't supposed to be, and I mean, it's just you realize how fortunate you were. But if there's anything you can do to replicate that event, I certainly wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. And I will say I've come much closer to them on several occasions than on that day. It was my only visual encounter, but as you know, encounters can come in many different forms, whether it's visual or audible. I've certainly had a lot of experience in that realm, some fairly recently. It even smell encounters, which I finally had that experience, and that was enough for me to check that block. I don't know if I want to smell that again, but
I would imagine.
Yeah, and we've I could tell you visually there, and I can't confirm it, but as recently as October, I spent some time on the Omaha reservation in Nebraska. Met up with some friends of mine that are actually tribal members, and they took me out. I spent a week over there. They took me out in their research area, which is right along the Missouri River, and it's some rolling hills that have very dense hardwood trees, groves, I guess, oak and maple and whatnot. And I had seen some videos my friend had posted, and I didn't know what to think of them. But to go there and experience what I had seen on video was, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. But he would take me out to this area that was, we'd be going out like midnight till 2 a.m. And we did this Monday through Friday. I mean, I was getting back to my motel at like 3 a.m. And my friend would take me out to this area, very remote area, no traffic to speak of, pitch black, no lighting, nothing. And the first time, which was Monday, he took me out to this place, and we literally stood on the fog line of the road, this 2-lane road we were on, and he said, just look over there, and I'm watching, and it's just pitch black, and then he would call out in his native tongue. He would say, "Oho, kage," which means hello, friend, and then he would say gigaho, which means come closer. And I'm like, who's he talking to? What's going on? And all of a sudden, out in the dark, 2 glowing lights that really took on the look of eyes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like looking at that, and then it would fade out, and then all of a sudden it'd come back on. And I'm talking when it shined bright, and they would at times dim and get brighter. They were really bright. I mean, in some cases brighter than my LED flashlight. And
what color?
Different colors. And I've got video of it. Mostly white, but then at times they would change to orangish, sometimes reddish, even at one occasion almost looked bluish, but and then a few seconds later, off this direction, blink, there's another set of eyes, or whatever it was. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And sometimes we had three sets of eyes, and they moved. They would shift sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right. Sometimes they would come forward towards us. Sometimes they'd back away, and it wasn't just that. There were vocalizations that came along with these. I remember the first night we were there. After about an hour and a half or so, we were just about ready to leave, and this very high pitched. I just assumed it was female just because it was a very high pitch. I've never heard a vocalization quite like it, but it was almost like a song. I mean, it was really quite beautiful. In fact, it was in no way, shape, or form was it coyote. And she would go on for like 5 or 6 seconds and then take a break, and then maybe 10 seconds later repeat herself, and it would repeat the same way. And this happened 4 times in probably a period of 30 seconds or so. And I'm looking at him going, "Is that them?" And he's going, "That's them. Definitely, they know you're here." And
doesn't that sound reminiscent of the Uwari audio of the singing? Yeah, it sounds very female is what I got out of it. Not to say that it was, but that's what I got out of it too, with that audio clip out of the Uwari in North Carolina. So, wow, that's fascinating.
I don't think I've heard that, but I'd love to, just for comparison. But
no, we'll send it over to you. Yeah.
It wasn't just that. Thanks. It wasn't just that though. There was one time I think it was a Wednesday night. We weren't getting much activity, and my friend says to me, who's happens to be a Mormon, quite religious and devout, and he says, I've tried this before, and sometimes it works. He says, I'm going to pray with them. Sometimes I get some response when I pray with them. So he's talking to them like in just in English and saying, "Hey, Kige, I want to pray for you, and I want to pray for your families, and that the Creator will keep you safe and keep you happy. If you want to, please come closer and let me share you the Word of God. But I'm going to pray for you right now." And so he bows his head. He does like about a 3-minute prayer in English. And I'm just sitting there, head down, listening to him. And I want to say about 45 seconds to a minute into it, we heard this amazing call. I'll try to not blow your ears out, but I'll just kind of imitate it here. It just went. It did this 4 times, like, I don't know, within 10 or 15 seconds. It loud and seemed very close, much closer than the eye shine we had seen earlier. So that was just amazing. He didn't even blink an eye. He just kept on. He finished his prayer, and when he was done, I said, "Did you hear that?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's them. That's them. They came closer. I thought that might work." Another time, I had brought my Tascam with me. I wish I had brought some game cameras, but I did have my Tascam, which, for your listeners that don't know, it's a digital tape recorder, very sensitive, very high tech. And I decided one day I know how to get there now. And before I meet up with my friend, I'm going to drive to that location. I wanted to see the daylight. I wanted more just to see the backdrop, because again, every time we're going in there, it's just as black as it could be. And I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything in the background, something that could reflect light or some ambient light from a street lamp or a house or something. And when I got there, there was a bowl, a hillside, but directly behind where we were seeing these lights. So there was nothing that could really account for the lights. But I had to see that for myself. And so I decided I was going to hike up into the area about where I'd seen them and plant this tape recorder and just leave it running. And these tape recorders can go for like 3 days. Now, typical Bigfoot blunder. I got up in there and I hit the button on the recorder and the red light came on and I thought, great. And it's running. So I put it down between these two oak trees. Just as I stood up off to about my 10 o'clock from the distance, I hear this female again doing the exact same thing in broad daylight. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're out here and they probably know I'm here. And, this is a reaction to my being out there. And I'm thinking, great, I got that on tape. I turn and walk toward the car and I got maybe 10 steps or so when I heard something like this. About that fast and much louder. Something hitting a tree or hitting something in rapid succession 6 times. And I'm out there. There's nobody out there. There's no cars in the area. I just like, okay, I'm out of here. Bigfoot blunder was that I forgot with the Tascam, the first push of the power button turns it on. The second one starts the recording. So unfortunately, when I went back to check, I had nothing. But I will say these vocalizations, these what he calls eye shine, were fantastic, and they were very almost predictable. We were out there. I should say this too, because of course, one of the things concerned me. I'm the white man on the reservation, and maybe they're gonna hoax this guy. But during this time, we were right in the middle of that pandemic, and the main village on the reservation, Macy, was quarantined. They had guards going in and out of the town, and nobody was supposed to leave. Everybody was supposed to be in, I think, by 10 o'clock. And because of my friend's stature in the council, we got special permission to be out there. But so I don't think for a minute there was a hoax going on, because everybody else other than my friend and I were pretty much locked down in the local village. But so that was just, and I should add too, we went to a second site at one point when we weren't getting some activity at the main site, an area they call Hard Knocks. And it was extremely remote. Here I am driving this 2020 rental car, and he's taking me out in the boondocks on what I should have had a 4-wheel drive in. I'm like, dude, I got to get this car back in one piece, But it was so remote. We were just literally, I couldn't even see the road through all the grass I was bulldozing. And we got into this area one of the nights, and I'll be damned if after maybe 5 minutes we started getting this eye shine again. Completely different location. And we had one straight down the road from us. We eventually had another one kind of flanking us off to the right that we could see. And I'm just like, dude, have you ever tried to approach them? And he's like, no, I don't do that. And I go, here, hold my beer. And I just very slowly started walking toward the set of glowing eyes down this road, and I'm like, oh, I hope this turns out better than the movie. And I got probably about halfway toward them, and they just kind of blinked out, and I never saw them again. But it was pretty hairy.
I would imagine so.
So that was, I'm just saying that as far as visual sightings, there's a chance I could claim that that was my second visual sighting, and to have it happen 5 nights in a row is just phenomenal.
Yeah,
absolutely phenomenal.
Absolutely,
no, that's very lucky, actually. Do you consider it lucky? Do you consider it a blessing, or is this just something that, I don't know? Take your opinion from it. How do you consider it?
I think when you look at the odds and how many people that are out there almost on a daily basis looking for these things, and most generally come up empty-handed, and many, I would say the vast majority of sightings are from people that weren't looking for them at all. Yeah, I do think I was very lucky to have seen it. I feel like I was really blessed, in fact, to have had that had that encounter that day. I've always said, you don't go find Bigfoot. You get out where Bigfoot's at, and they'll find you. And I think that's true in most cases. But from that day, in April 3rd, 1993. I've taken into account how blessed I was, and how rare, what were the odds that I would see these things. I can't help but think there was a purpose in that, And
yeah, because that was kind of where my question was. I didn't mean to step on you, but that was kind of my question. Do you feel that maybe there's something a little bit bigger than what we all understand, that you were meant to see this experience? Jamie asked a question if you were able to see any anatomy similar to Patty, male or female.
No, I was not close enough to make out any sort of gender or facial features, but I can tell you the silhouettes, and all three of these big guys literally look like either professional weightlifters or football players. I mean, the head sat squarely on the shoulders. There was really no visible neck to be seen. It was almost as if their trapezoids, or trapezoids rather, went from their ears straight to the edge of their shoulders,
Right.
And in that regard, and especially the fact that they had this barreled chest, this huge barreled chest, that as it went to the waist, it literally tapered down to the waist. So I got this barrel chest and a taper down the waist. They really were a departure from what Patty showed. Now, mainly, of course, we get a side profile of Patty in the Patterson-Gimlin footage, but she, to me, the more I've thought about it, she to me looked possibly pregnant, or that, or just like some of us older people, we tend to put on a little more weight as we get older, but no, these guys were extremely fit compared to what the Patterson film showed.
Have you seen any artwork in any Sasquatch community, or artwork presented that would say, yeah, that's what I saw, as far as at least the physiology of it?
Oh, yes. And I've actually drawn it on occasion myself. When I finally learned that there were other groups out there researching this, and I had no idea how many, but I was fortunate enough to find the Bigfoot Research Project, which at that time was operating up here on Mount Hood in a little town of Parkdale, and headed up by none other than Peter Byrne. And when I found out they existed, I made a call. They had, believe it or not, their phone number was 1-800-BIGFOOT. And it went to voicemail, and I just left a message going, I don't know if you guys are for real, but I can tell you I've seen something that I think you might be interested in. and almost immediately got a call back. And they sent me. They had a standardized. Oh, I have it around here somewhere, but they have a standardized questionnaire that they sent to me, and on the back page they allowed you to draw what you saw, and I did back then, and I have seen some. I think in most cases, a lot of the artwork I've seen really misses out on the fact of the abnormally long arms and legs, for that matter, in comparison to that of a normal human torso. They are physiologically different. I mean, we share certain things in common. They were upright and 2 legs, 2 arms, but there's definitely a very telltale physiological difference between us and them. Not just the size, of course, but the actual silhouette.
Isn't that probably, to me, that would be the most stunning thing? Now, again, I have not had any visual encounters at all, but to me, it would seem that would be the most stunning thing, that there is another creature that's bipedal, period. It doesn't have to go any further than that, because ever since birth, we assume we are the only bipedal creature that roams the earth, and yet to have another one, I think we correlate a lot into that it must have a higher intelligence level. Why the fact is it bipedal? It must be a monster. And of course, with the culture that gets presented in all these movies and so on, it can't be a gentle creature. No, it has to be terror of the woods, and it's out to kill you. But again, it would seem to me, and I don't know what your take is on it personally, to see another bipedal creature, how shocking must that be?
Well, like I said, my first instinct, and I think it's just natural on my part, and probably would be on anybody's part, because you're not thinking, Bigfoot. And this was a very serious, sober activity we were involved in, and very dangerous. And my first reaction was, what are those people doing down there? Because my mind couldn't really, when it's something you don't believe in existing, there's a tendency to try to make it in. It's got to be something else, and it's just you. The more you look at them, the more you realize that you're seeing something, whether you want to believe it or not, is what it is. And you're kind of initially in a process of denial, if you will.
Right.
And I think that's natural for anybody seeing anything like that, whether it be that or UFO or Loch Ness Monster or whatever.
Right.
But considering the time I had to look at it, it wasn't like, oh wow, something flashed through the trees, it must have been Bigfoot. This was something that I really had to. It took me really a little bit of time, a few seconds, really, to really comprehend and accept what it was I was seeing. And it was. Like I say,
Okay.
I can see it as clearly today as in my mind as if it was yesterday.
Right. So in all the years in which you have spent since this encounter, which way do you lean? Do you think that this is a flesh and blood, or do you think that this is something that we just can't comprehend, that might be something beyond this world? What's your initial take?
I have never really entertained the paranormal aspect of this. I'm fully aware of a lot of people do. I try to look at these things from a scientific point of view, not that I'm a scientist, but from strictly a biological viewpoint. Do they have traits, characteristics that we don't have? I have no doubt certainly they have much more sharpened sense of woodcraft, if you will. I mean, that's their whole life. Do they have intelligence? Yes. You know, we look at the word paranormal. It doesn't necessarily mean, anything other than outside the norm. So in that sense, I can buy into it. But do I think they can disappear and appear on command, and that they go through portholes, and that, they can read your mind, do mind speak, and that kind of stuff? No, I don't. I don't know. None of us do, but I'm just not willing to go that far. And I think, and I've seen it actually over years with other researchers, friends that initially take the same standpoint as I do, and then as years go on, they tend to start drifting in that direction. And I think it's really is born out of frustration more than anything else. I've done everything I can do to try to find these things. Yeah, I'll find a track here and there, but dang it, if I can't find them through conventional hunting methods, tracking methods, then there's got to be something else. And I've heard many stories that seem to correspond with each other about their, for instance, the abilities to quote unquote cloak. Now, you hear it enough times, there's got to be a grain of truth in that. So what I've done, and more recently, is I've tried to look for some sort of scientific something that could account for why they seem to, 1 minute they're there, the next minute they're not. Now you see it, now you don't. And so I've been experimenting with a couple of ideas involving light and camouflage. One of the things I've got 2 hair samples. I don't have them personally, but I've seen them. I've got photos of them. Hair samples under microscopes, backlit, and those 2 really stick out to me for this reason. One of the ones I've seen, there's a clump of hair that is magnified, and there appears to be some sort of metallic crystalline scaling, I think is the word, the cortex and the scaling and whatnot. And because white light, which is what they use to backlight it, is the presence of all light, and it's obviously in a unnatural environment, these looked, it almost looked like glitter, if you will, that was embedded in the hair itself, that they put off almost every color of the rainbow. And it got me thinking, I've never seen a hair like that. And if their hair has these microscopic crystalline structure on the actual outside of the hair, now take away the white light and put them in a forest, and now instead of reflecting every light color of the rainbow, it's going to reflect all the colors around it. Now, I'm not going to say it makes it 100% invisible by any means, but it sure would give it a partial cloaking ability, as long as they're, provided they're not moving, they're going to actually be reflecting their surroundings. The second hair sample I saw that really struck me odd was, again, a cluster of hairs under a microscope, backlit with white light, but there were certain hairs that appeared to be opaque or clear, even to the point where, as they're crossing over each other, you could see through some of the hair in front of some of the hair behind it, and very clearly see the hair behind it through these clear shafts of hair.
That's interesting.
So I started, again, just pondering how that might have an effect on their ability to be camouflaged. And I actually went out and I bought, this is fiber optic line here. I bought 100 feet of it. And as you know, I can touch a light to one end of this. And even though it's wrapped up round like this, I could tie it in a knot, whatever.
Right.
If I touch a light to one end of it, it's going to travel through this and actually come out the other end.
Right.
And so if maybe not all, but if part of their hair, how like dogs will have guard hair and then they'll have an undercoat of hair. If they have a layer of hair, maybe just longer external hair than the hair below it, and if there is some clear hair embedded in that fur, if I don't think you can call it fur, it's hair, but it could technically conduct light again. The surrounding light that it's in, all the colors, the greens and the browns and the that are out there, could very well be absorbed and shown, transmitted, if you will, through those hair shafts. It'd be the ultimate camouflage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've got 100 feet of this, and I plan to do some experimenting with it. If I can get some sort of hide, perhaps bear. I don't need to make a suit of it per se, but I can make a large board of it and integrate, weave some of this through the hide itself and just set it in different positions out in the woods, in different lighting conditions, and just see if it gives that sort of a camouflage effect. So those are just a couple of things I'm working on, but here's again an idea where you take something that, there's just too many stories for them all to be wrong, but maybe it's what their perception is of why they seem to disappear and reappear, what have you, that there may be a scientific reason behind that. So,
I've been up in, doing a hiking trip up in Wisconsin, and at one time, I literally, and I was with friends too, I literally walked into the ass end of a buck and I didn't even see it because, and of course this is more mundane because of the fact that they remain perfectly still, and a creature that remains perfectly still becomes invisible. You don't pick it up. And I walked right into the ass and it wasn't until I touched the ass of that thing that it took off and ran. And of course, it scared me more than I probably scared it. But when you're in that type of an environment where, and of course, again, a buck's hair color is kind of relative to what its surroundings are. You picture a buck, oh, it's a nice tan color. But you know what? When you're in the woods and you have dead leaves on the ground and shrubs that are, it just blends so perfectly that I didn't realize it. And of course, it was a defense mechanism in which it remained perfectly still. So I think probably maybe some of that. And of course, I don't know. I'm not an expert. None of us are an expert. But I think there's a good possibility of what it is that you're presenting with transparent hair. Look at what polar bears. Polar bears have very transparent hair, which reflects the surroundings in which they're, which gives them that, because their skin is black. Polar bear skin is black, but yet you wouldn't know that by looking at one because it's reflecting its entire surrounding. And of course, there is some white hair involved in that to maintain that camouflage against the snow, but primarily it's hollow, clear hair. And that's not that far-fetched to say.
It's how the light reacts,
refracts,
with it. And I've used that analogy many times. And in fact, that's kind of what got me thinking along the lines of the clear hair shafts, being able to pick up the surrounding. And so, yeah, that's a great point you make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it could also be environmental. I mean, like in a way, you're in where they live, so like they know what tree is going to cover them from your angle, and they have spots where they can duck down and things like that. I mean, that's got to be a percentage of it too, you know.
No, that kind of makes sense, Bake.
Yeah.
Sure it does.
Well, he says that, and I talked to a witness on the phone last week who, as he observes this creature, the creature tries to get away from him. And as this creature realizes that he can't, it becomes pretty frustrated. So I think there's some merit to what you're saying, James. And I think there's some, merit to what you're saying, Todd, is if it has this capability, but it is triggered by its environment, if it still can't get out of the way of its, observer, it's got to be a pretty frustrating scenario for this thing that, guys, by all means and all accounts, most of the time it tries to avoid our detection. It doesn't want to be seen by us, and we catch it in fleeting moments. So there may be a lot of merit to what you're saying, Todd, and I'm really interested to see the results you get from this testing that you're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a great idea. I never thought of doing.
And another question we had, Todd, from Jamie was, he was curious when we go back to the part where your friend was, tried the prayer technique. By the way, that's not the first time I've heard of something like that working either. There's been a lot of times where I've heard of people meditating or in prayer that, and I wonder if it's, while we're doing it, it's because we're becoming more aware of our, senses, and we're becoming more in tune with the environment. Jamie wants to know if it's a technique that you now respect after having such great results with vocalizations.
What technique is that?
The prayer or the meditation.
Oh yeah, I think there might be something to that, and it may well be that. I mean, I'm sure my friend believes that that they understand, if not the actual definition of the words that he's saying in his prayer, that the intent of this passive communication, the fact that we're not looking straight at them, we have our heads bowed. I've always said that I believe they are intelligent, partially based upon curiosity. I mean, if you think about it, it's what sets us apart from other animals, and that is, and just to make my point, is that day where I had my sighting, we were setting off charges, every 1 or 2 hours, and I mean, we were putting up mushroom clouds and shaking the ground. I mean, making miniature earthquakes, and most people, when you think about it and think about what reaction wildlife would have to something as traumatic as that would be, they'd be going, 180 degrees away from such a thing. And especially when it's happened more than once and you don't know what the cadence of these things are going to be. It stands almost in when I think of these things within an hour, and that's who knows, they could have been there sooner. It's just happened to be the time window that I saw them in. But I mean, the fact that they could steel themselves to disregard the potential danger, and that's the other thing. I guarantee if there were any humans in that area, they would be getting the hell out of there. But it's this concept of curiosity, of wondering, and when you've got a level of curiosity that's willing to override your innate fears, because you're that much wanting to know, without regard to your own safety. I mean, that just tells me that it's intelligence that drives them, and that's I think like I say, most of these sightings are people discovering that these things have been watching them, you know, and it stands to reason that that they can get up on us long before we would even know they're there. But I find it interesting that they find us fascinating as much as we do them. That they want to know more about us. But again, there's this, you know, cushion of caution between them and us. But yeah, maybe if you present a more passive and a passive posture, and then give them a reason to investigate you. And that's kind of been the premise of my expeditions from day one. It's to entice contact. In fact, my first expedition was on the anniversary of my sighting on that exact location. I mean, I was actually in the quarry and had set up a base camp there with a friend of mine. The second would be 5 years before I had a follow-up one, also in the same general area. I had Peter Byrne and Ron Moorhead along with me as a duration team for 8 days. And they will come in to check you out. I have no question about it. We had some vocalizations going on. In fact, I would say the very closest I ever got to one of these creatures was during that expedition, and which, by the way, was dubbed Operation Entice Contact 2, or EC2. There were I had 4 hats made that each of us on the team wore that said EC2 on it, and Ron has one, Peter has one, of course I do, and then I think the other one was Woody Woodruff, who was a very experienced hunter that joined us later on. But that, I think, is the key. Put yourself out in an area where there's been some recent activity. Know that they know you're there, but in the same token, don't make your presence glaring, you know. Feel free to, like, I have some camouflage netting that I could cover my whole motorhome with. That's not to hide it from them by any means. It's just to make it blend in more and we see more natural with the background. But, you know, don't be firing off guns. Don't be blaring a stereo. Although I've heard people say, well, you did fire, you know, you were doing explosives, and sometimes they like certain music or whatever. But there are different things that both conventional and non-conventional that I've utilized over the years. And I know a lot of my colleagues have, to just give them a reason to come in. But then again, make sure that it's done in an environment that's not threatening.
You know, Todd, if you were to throw a Molotov cocktail into your living room, I think you're going to want to stand your ground, and you're going to want to make your presence be known. So going back to your initial encounter, you know, these things show up going, what, you know, WTF? What are you doing here? What are you detonating? You know, and they're going to show their presence to maybe to defend their backyard or their living room. And it makes perfect sense to me that they may not turn and run. I know that if I were being assaulted, I will stand up and make myself be known in the presence of my living space.
Well, my thought was that, you know, these were certain individuals of perhaps a group, a clan of these things that were basically scouts. They were coming out to, you know, you're not going to bring the wife and kids, but you're going to go out and investigate what the heck's going on. Another analogy I've used, and I think it's probably more apropos than a Molotov cocktail in your living room, but is this. Let's imagine for a moment and your listeners can come right along with us here. Let's imagine you're at home. You live in say a suburban area, or you're out on your porch, having a cocktail. Birds are singing. Everything is just, copacetic. And then out of the blue, literally, pun intended, an airliner comes down, falls from the sky on fire, and crashes, say, a quarter of a mile away from you. The ground shakes. There's a huge explosion. There's a ball of fire. Now, I think initially, anybody in that situation is going to be in a state of shock.
Right.
But once they've gathered themselves and realized what just happened and that there's not a second one coming behind it or what have you, that there is a very, I think, natural, innate,
to investigate, right?
Well, for a couple of possible motives, one might be, hey, maybe I can help save some lives, or maybe just out of morbid curiosity. Once you've calmed down, I think all the people surrounding that area of that crash, all the neighbors outside of the danger zone, are going to be drawn in like flies. At least, So, and I think that's kind of what happened. I think they, I think initially, we rocked their world, and we shook them up, literally and figuratively. And I think once they, caught their breath, they said, "Let's go check this out, man," because that's just you don't see that every day.
All right. No, and I'm totally on board with that. And then that's a really good point, because I've been in that situation. Probably most of us have been in that situation where you hear a car crash or something, and you're like, "Whoa, what was that?" And then you get up, and then you want to investigate and see what was going on. If you can help, or if you just want to be part of the gawking crowd just to see what the tragedy was that happened, you would show up. And it's very possible that's what these things were doing. They were just showing up to see, whoa, hey, there's a bad situation here. We need to protect the family. Or, whoa, look at this. Stuff just blew up magically by itself, and there's vehicles driving away over there. Not that they, talk to themselves in an English language, but it's still the same thought process probably goes through any creature in that type of a situation.
Or stand there and take selfies with the plane back there.
Right.
No, but I just think it's a natural response to something like that.
No, that's a good point.
Not if you're a deer or an elk or a squirrel, but these things were curious enough that they were able to eventually overcome what you would think would be a natural fear of an unnatural event, and that curiosity drove them there. And I think we need to exploit that. I think we need to try to pique their curiosity, and in doing so, as long as you're at the ready and you have certain cameras at the ready and devices where you can get that perfect shot, that Kodak shot, that I think you're going to have better luck than people just going out there and tearing up the woods.
No, we still have 100 years to go, though, to understand what these creatures are and what their intent is. So
I don't. You might.
Well, who's to say? Until you have one in a zoo, which I don't think that'll ever happen for various reasons. I don't know.
I think more than likely, before we have a live specimen, we're gonna come across a dead one, and I think it's really just a matter of time. And most likely, it's not going to be a researcher that stumbles on it. It's going to be some
hiker,
some Billy Joe Bob out there just going fishing, and look.
Right.
I actually hope it's not a researcher, because of what I've learned from the different times that we've had the kind of saw something, I think a normal person would tell everybody they could find, put it in the truck, go down to the local vet and go, hey, what is this? There'd be 500 pictures on the internet by the afternoon, where a researcher would stuff it in a locker somewhere and hide it, until he could get his full credit. So I really want just the average person to be driving down the road and going, hey, that ain't a dead bear.
Mhm.
What the hell?
Well, I kind of have a different take from that, and that is, just thinking about, because I think we've all gone over that scenario at different times in our research. The big what if. And personally, if I were to come across something like that, yes, I would secure it, but absolutely. But I would then get in touch with, long before I ever went to the public or to the media, I would get some samples and get together with, first and foremost, geneticists that can do DNA testing on a sample. Again, I'd want to retain the chain of custody, not for greed reasons, but just for scientific reasons. You'd want to do that, and then once you get the analysis back that confirms it's an unknown species, or at least can't be matched with any specific known animal, then you can bring in an anthropologist on your terms, have them look at it, biologist, zoologist, whatever ologist you want. But again, with signed non-disclosure agreements, and just bringing them in for their professional. I think that's the proper way to do it. I understand what you're saying, but I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. And the last thing I want to end up reading in the paper is two drunk guys walk into a bar with a box full of bones, because
I get that.
Yeah, it's just there's a right way to do it. I think that there's a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Todd, you come across a 900-pound creature that's dead. What do you do? Do you take a hand? Do you take the head? Do you take what? What would you take?
Well, initially what I would do, obviously mark the location, but I'd want to come to, just like any sort of anthropological site, I would want to bring in, I'd want to grid the area off in probably 3-foot sections. I would want to bring in tools, maybe have a shaker box available to start, going through this like you would any forensic or archaeological find, and make sure you cover each and every one of those squares so that you're not missing a hand or a leg or what have you. And lots of photographs, original positions of where they're at. I'd probably employ 1 or 2 very trusted individuals to help, because that's a lot of work and time is of the essence. But I would probably mark each bone with a number on tape or whatever, or where it was located, so that you can take it to another location. Right. Once you get it to another location, you can then reassemble it. But handling it has got to be done very delicately. You'd want to have gloves on and whatnot, just so you don't contaminate it. But I mean, that's what I would do. Obviously, like I say, time is of the essence, because you don't know if there's other scavengers that are going to come in and get in on the deal, or if their buddies are going to come around.
Well, with the 900,000 interviews that I've heard, okay, one goes down, another one's going to take it to go take care of the body. Yeah. So, if that's the case, you don't know. So what do you do if you come across a deceased one, or even recently deceased? What do you do immediately before you grid the area out? Do you just chop a hand off and throw it in your pack and say, I'm out of here?
Well, if I were by myself,
I don't know.
If I were by myself,
yourself.
No. My thought would be, and again, it would depend on the condition of the carcass.
Right.
But if it were, if it obviously had been sitting there for 4 to 6 months, maybe still had a little meat on the bones, maybe there's some hair in the area, I would
Have
probably, I'd probably, kick things up a notch. But if it did appear to be a somewhat recent death or kill, then I would be tempted to take some samples just to secure that evidence. I mean, God gave us 2 of these, and God gave us 2 feet. I mean, you could take a hand and a foot and leave the rest of it in its natural anatomical positions, but you'd still have something. It might not be a bad idea to have some security with you once you do go back to that site. It's hard to say. Every situation is different, but I think we've all had that fantasy at one point that we. What would we do?
That's all that is.
Find it?
Yeah, that's all that is.
Well,
what do you do in that situation? You're training for something that you may never encounter, but you would like to know what you would do in that situation. That's all.
Well, the ability to take hundreds of photographs is in our pocket most of the time in that situation. So whether it may be not ideal, you still have the ability to take an awful lot of photographs of the subject before you hawk off a limb and head out of the woods.
Yeah, right.
And, you at least got something to back. And it sounds morbid, I know, listeners. So, I said earlier, I'm getting a chainsaw and a Yeti cooler,
Yeah.
But
right. And in this loving community, you take 1,000 pictures, darn well everybody will be on board going, no, that's not a hoax. No, there's no photoshopping here. Yeah, okay,
but dead is dead, and a specimen is a specimen. Yeah. So you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we blew through that hour and went over another quarter. Todd, any final thoughts for the listeners tonight?
Oh, are we on?
Yep, we're still on.
Oh,
we went over.
I didn't know I didn't realize we had started yet.
He does this every time, folks. Every time.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I would encourage your listeners to, if they want to contact me, I'm easily available at American Primate at AOL.com. I'm that other guy that's still on AOL. And I do have a website. Our American Primate Conservancy has an online presence at www.americanprimate.org. That's ORG. We have Facebook, obviously. We can connect that way. I have one just under my name, Todd Neiss, Neiss. And then we've also got a Facebook page for the Conservancy. Believe it or not, it's under American Primate Conservancy. And we have one for our annual gathering, or I like to call retreat, private event for researchers. That's coming up in June. But it's fun to go to that Facebook page. Again, it's just listed under Beachfoot, and look at all the people that have attended and the expressions on their face. This will be our 14th year. It was just an idea that took off and took on a life of its own, and we have a lot of fun with researchers over a 4-day period. So Facebook, it's my name, or American Primate Conservancy, or Beachfoot. And again, my email is americanprimate@aol.com. So if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Well, Todd, I will say this on behalf of Sasquatch Experience and probably the 150 million viewers. Thank you for your service to our country. We greatly appreciate it.
The honor's mine. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure.
All right, guys.
Henry, what's your words, buddy?
Folks, I'm Sean Forker, and you've been along for the journey. We got Henry May up there above us, James Baker to the right of me, left of me, Vance Nesbitt is up in the corner where he belongs. Henry, where can folks find you?
Oh, folks can find me on my Facebook, Henry B. May the 4th.
HBM the 4th. And we've got big things coming from Henry May. He's just not a pretty face that sits in the corner. We got some things coming your way with Mr. HBM. Hey, Bake, where can folks find you?
Lately I've been at home. I'll tell you that this has not been Baker's week, but in general, I'm either at work or I'm at home. And if you find Forker, you usually can find me.
That's true. Vance, shoot him, buddy. Where they get you?
Okay, well, everybody can find me behind the blue microphone or on Facebook at Vance A. Nesbitt, Nesbitt, or on Instagram, which is Vance_Nesbitt, STF News. We've changed it up a little bit for Stranger Than Fiction, just for Sasquatch Experience. So you can come over to Sasquatch Experience and get your weekly news update on the weirdest stuff that's currently going on. So
yes,
yeah, that's where I'm at.
STF News, and sometimes it's just STFU. And folks, I'm Sean Forker. I'm my name. You can find me everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, social media. I'm kind of a social media kind of guy. Special thanks to our executive producers over there, Tommy Oak and Brian Corbin. Guys, we couldn't do the show without you. Folks, you too can become a Patreon for as little as $2 a month now. $2 makes you one of the hollers. Yes, we kind of did it on purpose. The Hollers Club. Mm-hmm. For $2, you get access to ad-free shows. Go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Sasquatch Experience to learn about how you can support your favorite Bigfoot podcast. And until next week, Henry, give them the line.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
Keep on squatching, everybody.
Yes.